Imagine this: a beautiful, pregnant wife in a luxurious mansion, preparing a romantic anniversary dinner for her millionaire husband. But as the food grows cold and the hours tick by, she uncovers a receipt that shatters her perfect world: a secret affair with her best friend, hidden phones, whispered plots to abandon her and the unborn baby, and a web of lies that spirals into fraud, blackmail, and life-threatening danger. What starts as a heartbreaking betrayal explodes into an epic tale of revenge, empowerment, and unbreakable sisterhood. From emotional breakdowns to courtroom triumphs, this story of Betrayed at 7 months will have you on the edge of your seat, rooting for Sarah as she transforms from victim to victor, twists upon twists, including secret children, escaped criminals, and a fight for survival. Trust me, you won't believe how it ends. Or does it? If you're hooked already, hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed. Drop a comment with your biggest plot prediction. Share this with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe for more story breakdowns like this one. Don't forget to turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next chapter in our wild rides. Let's dive in. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany dining table as Sarah Mitchell sat alone, her 7-month pregnant belly barely fitting beneath the expensive Italian wood. The anniversary dinner she had spent all day preparing grew cold on bone china plates that cost more than most people's monthly salary. 20 empty chairs surrounded her in the mansion's formal dining room, each one a stark reminder of how isolated her life had become. Her phone buzzed against the silk tablecloth. Another text from David. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Dash D. No heart emoji. No apology." Just the cold efficiency that had replaced the warmth in their millionaire marriage betrayal signs were everywhere. But Sarah had been too trusting to see them. A single tear fell onto her diamond wedding ring, the one David had given her 8 years ago when they were young and dreaming of building an empire together. Back then, he called her his partner, his equal. Now she felt more like an expensive accessory in their Connecticut estate, worth $3.2 million, but somehow feeling worthless. The house phone rang, echoing through the cavernous rooms. Sarah's heart leaped. Maybe David had changed his mind. Maybe he remembered what day it was. "Mrs. Mitchell." The voice belonged to Patricia, David's secretary. "Mr. Mitchell asked me to reschedule your couple's massage appointment tomorrow. He has an emergency board meeting." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where baby Emma kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. "Another emergency," she whispered after hanging up. It seemed like everything was an emergency except their marriage. Walking through their mansion felt like touring a museum of better times. Family photos lined the hallway leading to their master suite, each one telling the story of their relationship's slow decay. There was their wedding day, David's eyes full of love and promise. Their first anniversary in Paris, when he surprised her with a weekend at the Ritz. Their second anniversary when he bought her the sapphire necklace she still treasured. But the photos from recent years told a different story. David's smile became more forced, his body language more distant. In their most recent family portrait, taken just 3 months ago, he stood a full arm's length away from her, his attention focused somewhere beyond the camera. Sarah paused at their bedroom door, remembering when this space had been their sanctuary. The king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets had once been where they planned their future, shared their dreams, made love with the passion of two people building something beautiful together. Now it felt cold and empty, even when David was in it. She caught her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror that dominated one wall of their walk-in closet. At 38, she was still beautiful, her auburn hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders, her green eyes bright despite her exhaustion. But pregnancy had changed her body, and she wondered if that was part of the problem. When had David stopped seeing her as a woman and started seeing her as just the pregnant wife he had to endure? The midlife insecurity moment hit her like a physical blow. "What happened to us?" she whispered to her reflection, touching her rounded belly where their daughter grew. What happened to the man who used to bring me coffee in bed and tell me I was beautiful even with morning hair? Sarah was about to turn away when she noticed David's jacket hanging in his section of the closet. His favorite navy blazer, the one he wore to important meetings. Something white peeked from the inside pocket. Probably a business card or restaurant receipt. David was meticulous about expenses, especially since the company went public 2 years ago. But when Sarah pulled out the folded paper, her world tilted on its axis. The Ritz-Carlton Miami, presidential suite, 3 nights, $4,800. The dates matched David's business trip from 6 weeks ago, the trip that had marked the beginning of his emotional distance. But what made Sarah's blood turn to ice was the guest information and reservation for 2 adults, her hands trembling. Sarah read the receipt again, hoping she had misunderstood. But there it was in black and white. David had booked a romantic suite for 2 people during what he claimed was a solo business conference about renewable energy investments. The marble floor of their closet felt cold against her bare feet as she sank down, clutching the receipt. 6 weeks ago, David had returned from Miami different, more secretive, more distant. He claimed the conference had been boring, that he barely left his hotel room except for meetings. But the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton wasn't a room for boring business meetings. It was a room for romance. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities, each one more devastating than the last. Maybe it was a client dinner that ran late. Maybe the hotel made a mistake. Maybe there was an innocent explanation that would make her feel foolish for doubting her husband. With shaking fingers, she dialed the Ritz-Carlton Miami. Good evening, Ritz-Carlton Miami. This is Amanda speaking. How may I assist you? Hi, I need to verify a reservation from 6 weeks ago. The name is Mitchell, David Mitchell. Certainly, ma'am. Let me check our records. Yes, I see the reservation. Presidential suite for 3 nights. Is there something specific you need to know? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The reservation shows 2 guests. Can you tell me who they were? I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can only provide that information to the primary guest or someone authorized on the account. Are you Mrs. Mitchell? Yes, Sarah lied, her voice barely a whisper. Oh, wonderful. Let me see. Yes, the reservation was for Mr. David Mitchell and Ms. Jessica Raines. They had a lovely stay in our presidential suite. The concierge noted they requested champagne service and couples spa treatments. Is there anything else I can help you with? The phone slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering against the marble floor. Jessica Raines, her former best friend, her maid of honor. The woman who had held her hand through 2 miscarriages before this pregnancy. The woman who had been David's business partner for the past 3 years. Sarah's emotional breakdown came in waves. First, the shock that froze her entire body. Then the disbelief that made her shake her head frantically, as if she could erase what she had just learned. Finally, the crushing weight of betrayal that sent her collapsing onto the cold marble floor, her pregnant belly making it impossible to curl up the way she wanted to. Outside, rain began pattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of their bedroom, as if the weather were responding to her emotional state. The sound that had once been soothing now felt like nature weeping with her. She lay there for what felt like hours, clutching the hotel receipt and remembering every interaction with Jessica over the past 6 weeks. The way Jessica had avoided her eyes during their last lunch together. The way she had changed the subject whenever Sarah mentioned David seeming distant. The way she had suggested that maybe Sarah was being too needy, too demanding of David's attention during his busy season at work. How long had it been going on? Was Miami the beginning, or just the first time they had been careless enough to leave evidence? Sarah struggled to her feet, her pregnant belly making every movement awkward and painful. She needed to think clearly, needed to figure out what to do next. But as she turned to leave the closet, another piece of white paper caught her eye. This one tucked behind David's tie rack. With trembling hands, she pulled out a second receipt. This one was local, from the Ritz-Carlton in Hartford, just 40 minutes from their home. The date was from last week. The same presidential suite booking, the same two-guest arrangement. The devastating realization hit her like a physical blow. He never stopped seeing her. While Sarah had been planning their anniversary dinner, worrying about nursery decorations, attending prenatal appointments alone because David was too busy, he had been continuing his affair with Jessica just an hour's drive from their home. Sarah clutched both receipts to her chest and whispered the words that would change everything. He never stopped seeing her. The rain against the windows grew harder, matching the storm that was building inside Sarah's chest. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with this devastating knowledge. Tonight, she would grieve for the marriage she thought she had and prepare for the battle she never wanted to fight. But first, she would have to survive the night knowing that the man sleeping next to her, the father of her unborn child, the person she had trusted with her heart and her future, had been living a lie for at least 6 weeks. And tomorrow, she would have to figure out how to protect herself and her baby from the wreckage of their perfect life. Sarah barely slept that night, lying stiff as a board next to David's sleeping form while her mind raced with questions and possibilities. When morning light filtered through their bedroom curtains, David was already gone. No goodbye kiss, no note, just the lingering scent of his expensive cologne and a coffee-stained mug in the sink. She found herself moving through their morning routine like a ghost. Prenatal vitamins with orange juice, whole grain toast with avocado for the baby's development, a shower in their marble bathroom that suddenly felt more like a mausoleum than a sanctuary. Every familiar action felt foreign now, tainted by the knowledge of David's betrayal with Jessica. Around 10 a.m., she heard David's key in the front door. Sarah's heart jumped, and she quickly stuffed the hotel receipts into her purse. She wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. She needed more information, needed to understand the scope of his deception before she decided how to respond. "Sarah," David's voice echoed through their foyer. "Where are you, sweetheart?" The endearment that once made her heart flutter now felt like sandpaper against her raw emotions. She found him in the kitchen, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit, holding a small Tiffany bag. "I felt terrible about missing dinner last night," he said, crossing to her with that boyish smile that had first caught her attention at a charity gala 9 years ago. "The Hendricks merger is consuming every waking moment, but that's no excuse for neglecting my beautiful pregnant wife." Sarah stared at the Tiffany bag, wondering if Jessica had helped him pick out whatever was inside. "You didn't have to do that," she managed. "Of course I did. Open it." Inside was a delicate diamond bracelet, probably worth more than most people's cars. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted it from the velvet box. "It's beautiful," she whispered, though the diamonds seemed to mock her now. David moved behind her, his hands gentle as he fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "I know I've been distracted lately. The stress of the merger, the new investors, the pressure to expand internationally. I promise things will calm down after the Napa trip." "Napa trip?" Sarah turned in his arms, searching his face for signs of deception. "I thought we could do a baby moon. Just the two of us at that little vineyard hotel you loved when we went for Tom and Rachel's wedding. Before Emma arrives and changes everything." His hands moved to her belly, and for a moment, Sarah almost believed in the fantasy he was weaving. This was the false hope moment she would later recognize as David's manipulation tactic. He was so good at it, so practiced at making her doubt her own instincts and believe in the version of their marriage he wanted her to see. "That sounds wonderful," she heard herself saying, even as part of her screamed that it was all a lie. David kissed her then, soft and sweet like the old days, and Sarah felt herself melting into the familiar comfort of his embrace. Maybe she had misunderstood the receipts. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe her pregnancy hormones were making her paranoid and suspicious. That afternoon, while David was at another emergency meeting, Sarah began packing for their Napa baby moon with something approaching genuine excitement. She chose her favorite maternity dresses, the ones that made her feel beautiful despite her changing body. She packed the massage oils David used to rub on her back when she was tired. She even included the silk nightgown she had been saving for a special occasion. It was while reaching for David's favorite cologne to pack for him that she found the second phone. Hidden behind his cologne bottles in the bathroom, vanity was a sleek black iPhone she had never seen before. Sarah's hands trembled as she powered it on, praying it was just a work phone, something innocent that would prove her suspicions wrong. The betrayal layer revealed itself with devastating clarity. The text thread with Jay was right there on the home screen. Dozens of messages exchanged over the past 2 months. Sarah's vision blurred as she read through the evidence of her husband's affair with her former best friend. Can't wait to be free of her and that baby. Read one message from David. The Napa trip is perfect cover. She'll never suspect anything when I'm in LA on business. Read another. I love you too. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. Jessica had replied. Sarah scrolled through weeks of intimate conversations, photos she couldn't bear to look at closely, plans for a future that didn't include her or their unborn daughter. The cultural reference to Elizabeth Gilbert throwing her scale in Eat, Pray, Love flashed through her mind as she hurled the phone across the bathroom, watching it shatter against the marble wall like her heart was shattering inside her chest. The Napa baby moon was a lie. David wasn't planning a romantic getaway to reconnect with his wife. He was planning another rendezvous with Jessica while Sarah believed they were healing their marriage. She sank onto their bathroom floor, her pregnant belly making it impossible to curl up the way she desperately wanted to. The Italian marble tiles felt cold against her skin as she processed the depth of David's deception. It wasn't just an affair. It was a complete alternate life, one where he and Jessica were the couple, and Sarah was just an obstacle to be managed and eventually discarded. The second peak of despair hit her as she realized Jessica had been at every business dinner for the past 6 weeks. Every time David came home late, claiming he had been entertaining clients with his business partner, he had actually been with the woman who was supposed to be Sarah's best friend. Jessica had sat at their dinner table just last month, admiring Sarah's nursery plans and offering to help organize the baby shower, all while carrying on an affair with Sarah's husband. Sarah found herself staring at their wedding photo, displayed prominently on the bathroom counter. In it, Jessica stood beside her as maid of honor, radiant in her peach bridesmaid dress, smiling at the camera while Sarah gazed lovingly at David. How long had Jessica been planning to take her place? Had she been attracted to David even then? At their wedding, while she held Sarah's bouquet and promised to support their marriage, the rain that had started the night before continued, creating a symphony of water against windows that matched the tears streaming down Sarah's face. She felt like she was drowning in her own life, gasping for air in a world that suddenly made no sense. Her water broke without warning, a warm rush that soaked through her maternity pants and pooled on the bathroom floor. For a moment, Sarah thought it was just more tears, her body expressing grief in every way possible. But then the cramping started, sharp and rhythmic, and she realized with terror that the emotional stress had triggered early labor. No, 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 she whispered, clutching her belly. Not now, Emma. Mommy needs more time to figure this out. But biology doesn't wait for convenient timing. As another contraction hit, stronger than the first, Sarah fumbled for her phone with shaking hands. She needed to call her doctor, needed to get to the hospital, needed to make sure her baby was safe despite the devastating emotional trauma her body had just endured. The stress has triggered early labor, she realized with growing panic. At 32 weeks, Emma would need specialized care, would face challenges that full-term babies didn't have to overcome. Sarah's affair discovery had potentially put her daughter's life at risk, and the guilt of that realization added another layer to her emotional breakdown. As she waited for the ambulance, clutching her belly and breathing through contractions, Sarah made her first important decision. She wouldn't call David. Not yet. She needed to process what she had learned, needed to protect herself and Emma from whatever came next. The man she had trusted with everything had proven himself capable of devastating deception. She couldn't trust him with this crisis too. The sound of approaching sirens mixed with the rain and Sarah's labored breathing, creating a soundtrack for the end of her old life and the terrifying beginning of whatever came next. The ambulance ride to Hartford Hospital passed in a blur of flashing lights and concerned voices. Sarah clutched the rail of the stretcher as another contraction hit. 32 weeks pregnant and terrified that the devastating discovery of David's affair was about to cost her the one thing that mattered most, her daughter's life. "Mrs. Mitchell, try to stay calm," the EMT said, checking her vital signs. "Stress can make early labor worse. Is there someone we should call?" Sarah shook her head, unable to form words around the betrayal still lodging in her throat like a physical presence. How could she explain that the person who should be holding her hand through this crisis was the same person who had caused it? The emergency room at Hartford Hospital was organized chaos. Nurses and doctors moving with practiced efficiency while families waited in various states of anxiety. Sarah was rushed into a labor and delivery room where monitors were immediately attached to track both her vital signs and the baby's heart rate. "Good news," Dr. Martinez announced after examining her. "Emma's heart rate is strong and steady. The contractions are real, but we might be able to stop them if we act quickly. The stress of early labor pregnancy complications from husband betrayal is more common than you might think, unfortunately." As the medical team worked to stabilize her condition, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling tiles and wondering how her life had changed so dramatically in 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been a happily married woman planning nursery decorations and anniversary dinners. Now she was fighting to keep her baby safe while processing the complete destruction of everything she had believed about her marriage. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway made her heart race. David's voice carried through the partially open door as he spoke urgently to someone on his phone. "Yes, I understand the merger timeline, but my wife is in premature labor. I'll have to call you back." He appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly composed despite the supposed emergency. His expensive suit unwrinkled, his hair still styled from whatever meeting he had left. But what made Sarah's blood freeze was the woman who appeared behind him. Jessica Raines stood in the hospital doorway like she belonged there, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the kind of designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine rather than rushed to a medical emergency. "I came as soon as I heard," Jessica said, her voice dripping with false concern. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" The audacity was breathtaking. The woman who had been sleeping with Sarah's husband for months, planning to be free of her and that baby, was now standing in her hospital room pretending to care about her well-being. "Jessica is here as my business partner," David explained quickly, though Sarah hadn't asked. "We were in a meeting when your sister called. The Hendricks merger can't wait, even for personal emergencies." Sarah stared at them. These two people who had been living a secret life while she planned baby showers and anniversary dinners. They stood together with the unconscious familiarity of lovers, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke of intimate knowledge and shared secrets. A nurse entered to check Sarah's IV, and David immediately shifted into the role of concerned husband, taking Sarah's hand and asking about the baby's condition. But his performance felt hollow now that Sarah knew the truth. Every gesture of care felt calculated. Every word of concern felt scripted. "The contractions are slowing down," Dr. Martinez announced. "Whatever caused the stress seems to be stabilizing. We want to keep you for observation, but I'm optimistic that we can prevent early delivery." David squeezed Sarah's hand. "That's wonderful news. I was so worried when Maggie called." Sarah's sister Maggie. She had listed her as an emergency contact months ago, back when she thought her husband could be trusted to care about her well-being. Now she was grateful for that decision. "I need to step out and make some calls," David continued. "Jessica, can you stay with Sarah while I handle the urgent business with Tokyo?" The fact that he was leaving his wife in premature labor to handle business calls should have been Sarah's first clue about his priorities. But what she couldn't have anticipated was what she would overhear while pretending to rest. Jessica moved to the window, apparently believing Sarah was asleep. Her phone conversation was conducted in low tones, but the hospital room's acoustics carried every word to Sarah's bed. "No, she's stable now. Dr. Martinez says the baby is fine." A pause. I know. Once she loses the baby, He'll leave her, but it looks like that's not going to happen. Another pause. Well, we'll have to find another way to speed up the timeline. Sarah's hand gripped the hospital bed rail so tightly her knuckles turned white with rage. The third peak of despair crashed over her as she realized the full scope of Jessica's manipulation. It wasn't just that Jessica wanted David for herself. She actively wanted Sarah to lose the baby, saw Emma as competition that needed to be eliminated. The conversation continued, each word driving another nail into the coffin of Sarah's former life. The prenup limits her to $500,000, so she'll have to start over from scratch. No house, no security, no way to raise a child in the lifestyle she's used to. She'll probably give up custody voluntarily just to survive financially. Sarah fought to keep her breathing steady, to maintain the pretense of sleep while learning the details of how thoroughly her husband and best friend had planned her destruction. They hadn't just fallen in love despite her existence. They had actively plotted to remove her from their lives with as little inconvenience to themselves as possible. David's already moving money to the Cayman accounts. By the time she files for divorce, most of the assets will be protected offshore. Jessica's laugh was cold and calculating. She's so trusting, so naive. She still thinks this is about love. The heartbreaking family drama hospital scene was playing out exactly as Jessica had planned. Except for one crucial detail, Sarah was conscious and recording every word on her phone. The device she had grabbed during the ambulance ride was now capturing evidence of conspiracy and financial fraud that would change everything about her divorce proceedings. When David returned an hour later, he found Sarah sitting up in bed, looking composed despite the emotional devastation she had just endured. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" he asked, resuming his role as devoted husband. "Better," Sarah said quietly. "Much clearer about everything." David and Jessica exchanged a quick glance, and Sarah saw the flicker of concern cross Jessica's face. But they both assumed she was referring to her medical condition, not her understanding of their relationship. Dr. Martinez returned with discharge instructions. Bed rest for the next week, minimal stress, and follow-up appointments twice weekly until we're sure the pregnancy is stable. The baby is strong, but stress is your biggest enemy right now. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Sarah made a silent promise to her unborn daughter. Emma would be born healthy and full-term if Sarah had anything to say about it, and by the time that happened, Sarah would be ready for the legal battle that was coming. Jessica hugged her goodbye in the hospital parking lot, the embrace of a Judas preparing for the final betrayal. "Take care of yourself, honey," Jessica whispered. "You and that precious baby are so important to all of us." Sarah smiled and returned the hug, knowing it would be the last time she would ever touch the woman who had once been her best friend. "Now I have proof of her true nature," Sarah thought as she watched Jessica and David exchange another meaningful look over her head. The recording on her phone would change everything. But first, she needed to get home and plan her next move. The war for her future was just beginning. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah was propped up in bed, following doctor's orders for complete rest, when she heard the front door open, followed by familiar footsteps on the marble staircase. "Sarah, where's my baby sister?" Margaret Maggie Chen appeared in the bedroom doorway, looking like she had traveled straight from a courtroom battle. At 40, Maggie was everything Sarah sometimes wished she could be: fierce, independent, and absolutely ruthless when protecting the people she loved. As one of Connecticut's most successful divorce attorneys, she had built her reputation dismantling the financial empires of cheating husbands. "Maggie," Sarah breathed, feeling relief wash over her for the first time in days. "How did you know? Hospital called me yesterday as your emergency contact. David was apparently too busy with his business partner to be reached immediately." Maggie's tone made it clear she had already formed opinions about David's priorities. "I caught the red eye from San Francisco as soon as I heard about the premature labor scare." Sarah struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as her body reminded her of yesterday's trauma. "I'm so glad you're here. Things are worse than you know." "Tell me everything," Maggie said, settling into the bedroom's reading chair with the focused attention she usually reserved for depositions. "And I mean everything. Sarah, No protecting David. No making excuses. What's really going on in this marriage for the next hour? Sarah laid out the devastating evidence she had discovered. The hotel receipts from Miami and Hartford, the secret phone with months of intimate messages between David and Jessica, the overheard hospital conversation about wanting her to lose the baby and planning her financial destruction. Maggie listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When Sarah finished, her sister was quiet for a long moment, processing the legal implications. "This is actually better than most cases I handle," Maggie finally said. "Most wives suspect affairs but have no concrete proof. You have documentary evidence of adultery, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, and recorded conversations about deliberate infliction of emotional distress. David just handed us a nuclear weapon. But the prenups become worthless when one party commits fraud or adultery in most circumstances, and David's mistake was moving assets after beginning the affair. That's called dissipation of marital property, and courts don't look kindly on it." Maggie pulled out her laptop and began typing notes. "We're going to destroy him legally, but first we need to document everything while you're safe, and he thinks you're clueless." Sarah felt a flicker of hope for the first time since finding the hotel receipts. "What do we do first?" "We become very good actresses. You're going to continue being the loving, trusting wife while I work behind the scenes to freeze assets, gather evidence, and prepare for war." David thinks he holds all the cards, but he's about to learn that underestimating the Chen sisters was his biggest mistake. As if summoned by their conversation, David's voice called from downstairs. "Sarah, I brought lunch from that Thai place you love." "Showtime," Maggie whispered. "Follow my lead and trust the process." David appeared in the doorway, carrying takeout bags and flowers, playing the part of the devoted husband caring for his bedridden wife. His performance was flawless, complete with concerned questions about her comfort and the baby's condition. "This must be Maggie," he said, extending his hand to Sarah's sister. "I've heard so much about your legal practice. Thank you for coming to support Sarah during this difficult time." Maggie shook his hand with a professional smile that gave nothing away. "Family takes care of family. I'm just glad Sarah and the baby are doing well." "The stress of the merger has been overwhelming," David continued, unpacking containers of Sarah's favorite Thai dishes. "I blame myself for not being more attentive to Sarah's needs during the pregnancy. Business success means nothing if I'm not taking care of the people who matter most." Sarah watched her husband perform, marveling at how convincing he could be when it served his purposes. 3 days ago, she would have melted at his apparent remorse and renewed attention. Now she saw it for what it was, damage control. "I've been thinking," David continued, settling onto the bed beside Sarah. "Maybe we should postpone the Napa trip until after Emma's born. I don't want to risk any travel that might stress you or the baby." "That's probably wise," Sarah agreed, though part of her wanted to know what he had really planned for their supposed baby moon. After David left for another urgent business meeting, Maggie began Sarah's education in strategic divorce planning. Step 1, we document everything: financial records, communication evidence, witness statements. Step 2, we secure your assets and establish separate financial identity. Step 3, we file when we're ready, not when emotions demand it. Sarah found herself energized by having a plan, by moving from victim to strategic participant in her own life. For the first time since her marriage began crumbling, she felt like she had some control. "What about Jessica?" Sarah asked. "She's not just the other woman. She's actively working to destroy me." "Jessica is David's accomplice in fraud and conspiracy. She'll face consequences too, but our priority is protecting you and Emma first." Maggie's smile was sharp as a blade. "Though I admit, I'm looking forward to deposing Ms. Raines about her role in this mess." They spent the afternoon watching episodes of The Good Wife, while Maggie took notes on plot points that reflected real legal strategies. "Alicia Florrick's mistake was trusting her husband's promises," Maggie observed. "We won't make that error." Around 6 p.m., David returned home early, bringing dinner and what appeared to be genuine relief at finding Sarah looking more stable. "I have good news," he announced. "I fired Jessica from the company today. You were right that our business partnership was putting too much a strain on our marriage. I'm bringing in a male partner to replace her, someone with no personal connection to our family." This was false hope, moment number two, and Sarah had to admire David's timing. Just when she was building emotional armor against him, he offered exactly what she would have wanted to hear 48 hours ago. "You fired Jessica?" Sarah asked, allowing hope to creep into her voice. "Effective immediately. I also booked us an appointment with Dr. Reeves for couples therapy next week. I want to rebuild what we've lost. Sarah, this pregnancy scare made me realize how much I could lose if I don't get my priorities straight." Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes, not from gratitude but from grief for the marriage these gestures might have saved if they had come 6 weeks ago, before Miami, before the secret phone, before the hospital conversation about eliminating her baby. "That means everything to me," she whispered, and for a moment, it was true. The man she had fallen in love with was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of deception and selfish ambition. After David fell asleep that night, Maggie and Sarah continued their legal strategy session in whispered tones. "He's panicking," Maggie observed. "Firing Jessica and offering therapy are classic moves of a guilty husband trying to buy time and manage damage. But what he doesn't know is that we've already recorded Jessica's confessions and documented his asset transfers." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "David didn't fire me. I'm consulting from the Miami office now. The therapy is just for show. Be patient. Soon we'll be together without any complications. Love you. J." Sarah showed the message to Maggie, whose grin was positively predatory. "Jessica just gave us proof that David lied about firing her and that the therapy offer is fraudulent. She's also confirming ongoing conspiracy." Maggie screenshotted the message. "I love it when defendants create evidence for us." But their moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of a car in the driveway. Through the bedroom window, they watched David's BMW pull up to the house. He got out and opened the trunk, removing several suitcases, and then Jessica Raines stepped out of the passenger seat, carrying what appeared to be her own luggage. "She's moving in before the divorce is even final," Sarah whispered, watching her husband and his mistress walk toward the front door of the home she had thought was hers. The gathering storm was about to become a hurricane, and Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about David's capacity for cruelty had been just the beginning. Sarah woke the next morning to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen below. Female laughter that wasn't hers, mixed with David's deep chuckles and the clink of expensive china. Jessica was making herself at home in Sarah's kitchen, cooking breakfast in Sarah's house, using Sarah's wedding china to serve the man Sarah had thought was her husband. "Stay calm," Maggie whispered from the guest room, where she had spent the night. "Document everything, but don't react yet. We need to let them hang themselves with their own arrogance." Sarah crept to the top of the stairs, her 7-month pregnant belly making stealth difficult. From her position, she could see into the kitchen through the open concept design David had insisted on during their renovation 3 years ago. Jessica stood at the Italian marble island, wearing one of Sarah's silk robes, scrambling eggs while David read financial reports and sipped coffee from the world's best husband mug Sarah had given him last Father's Day. "The Tokyo investors are asking about the prenup situation," David was saying. "They want assurance that the merger won't be complicated by divorce proceedings." "She's too trusting to make waves," Jessica replied, serving eggs onto plates that had been wedding gifts from Sarah's grandmother. "And even if she tries, she has no real evidence of anything actionable. Her sister can threaten all she wants, but prenups are nearly impossible to break in Connecticut." Sarah pulled out her phone and began recording, capturing both their voices and the visual evidence of Jessica brazenly occupying her home. "What about the hospital conversation?" David asked. "You said she seemed different after that, more alert." "She was sedated and exhausted. Even if she heard something, she wouldn't understand the legal implications. Sarah's sweet, but she's not exactly strategic." Jessica laughed, the sound like broken glass. She spent our entire friendship asking me for advice about everything from outfit choices to investment decisions. She's never made an important decision without consulting someone else first. Still, we should accelerate the timeline, David mused. I want the offshore accounts fully established before she has any reason to become suspicious. Sarah watched her husband and former best friend plan her financial destruction while eating breakfast off her grandmother's china, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. The gentle, trusting woman who had believed in fairness and forgiveness was disappearing, replaced by someone harder and infinitely more dangerous. After documenting 20 minutes of their conversation, Sarah returned to her room to find Maggie on her laptop, working with the focused intensity that had made her one of the most feared divorce attorneys on the East Coast. I've filed preliminary motions to freeze all marital assets pending investigation of fraud, Maggie reported quietly. I've also hired a forensic accountant to trace David's offshore transfers and a private investigator to document the affair. By this afternoon, David's going to discover that his wife isn't quite as helpless as he assumed. What about Jessica living here? Sarah asked. Can we force her to leave? Actually, her moving in is perfect for us legally. Connecticut is a fault-based divorce state, and adultery with cohabitation is grounds for both alimony termination and punitive asset division. Jessica just gave us everything we need to destroy David's financial position. At noon, while David was supposedly at a board meeting, Jessica made her first major strategic error. She posted a series of Instagram photos from various rooms in Sarah's house. The first photo showed Jessica in Sarah's master bathroom, wearing a designer outfit and holding a champagne flute. The caption read, "New beginnings in my new home. Sometimes life has to fall apart before it can fall into place. Blessed beyond measure." The second photo was taken in the nursery Sarah had spent months designing for Emma. Jessica posed next to the crib, her hand resting on the mobile Sarah had chosen, with the caption, "Exciting changes coming. Can't wait to fill this space with love and laughter." New chapter, blessed life, upgrade complete. But the third photo was the one that broke Sarah's heart and simultaneously handed her the most powerful evidence she could have hoped for. Jessica had photographed herself in Sarah's kitchen, wearing Sarah's apron, with Emma's ultrasound photos visible on the refrigerator behind her. Her caption read, "Home is where love lives. Finally found my forever place." Home is where the heart is perfect life, worth the wait. The hashtag upgrade complete felt like a physical slap. Sarah had been replaced. Her life literally taken over by another woman who saw her as nothing more than an outdated model to be discarded. Within an hour, the social media scandal pregnant wife betrayal had exploded across Sarah's social networks. The photos had been shared dozens of times, with comments ranging from confused to cruel. "Wait, isn't that Sarah Mitchell's house?" One mutual friend had commented, "Sarah's still pregnant. What is Jessica doing in her nursery?" asked another. But the comments that cut deepest were the ones from people Sarah had considered friends. "David deserves happiness. Sarah let herself go during the pregnancy. Jessica's always been more David's type. I'm surprised it took this long." Maybe if Sarah had paid more attention to her husband instead of obsessing over baby preparations, this wouldn't have happened. The public embarrassment millionaire divorce was happening in real time, broadcast to everyone Sarah knew through Jessica's calculated social media campaign. Her pregnancy announcement post from 5 months ago was now flooded with new comments as people connected the timeline. "Your husband's moved on. Honey, maybe you should too." At least Jessica can give David the sophisticated wife he needs for his business success. Some women know how to keep their men happy. Just saying. Sarah's phone rang constantly as friends and family members called seeking explanations for what they were seeing online. Her mother called from Florida, her voice sharp with disappointment. "Sarah, what is this nonsense I'm seeing on Facebook that Jessica girl is posting pictures from your house like she lives there? Have you and David separated? What about the baby?" "It's complicated, Mom," Sarah managed, not ready to explain the full scope of David's betrayal to her judgmental mother. Well, it's embarrassing for the whole family. Couldn't you have handled this privately? Now everyone knows your business. I raised you better than to air your dirty laundry in public. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that her mother was blaming her for the public humiliation, rather than questioning why Jessica had access to her home or why David was allowing another woman to post from their private spaces. Her country club friends were choosing sides with devastating swiftness. The women who had attended her baby shower just 2 months ago were now liking Jessica's posts and commenting about how refreshing it was to see David with someone who appreciated him properly. The midlife crisis moment hit Sarah like a freight train as she scrolled through the social media carnage. When had she stopped being Sarah and become just David's wife? When had her value become tied so completely to her marriage that losing it meant losing her entire identity? At 3 p.m., Maggie found Sarah crying over her laptop in their bedroom, reading comments that dissected her worth as a woman and wife for public entertainment. "Turn it off," Maggie commanded, closing the laptop firmly. "Social media is a weapon, and Jessica's using it against you, but she just made several crucial legal mistakes." "What do you mean posting from your marital home establishes residence, which affects property division?" "The nursery photo with Emma's ultrasound creates evidence of intentional infliction of emotional distress on a pregnant woman. And the upgrade comment demonstrates deliberate cruelty that will play beautifully to a jury." Maggie's smile was razor sharp. "Jessica thinks she's winning the social media war, but she's actually building our case." At 4 p.m., Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived for their appointment. Sarah had found the therapist through a referral from her obstetrician, a woman who specialized in helping clients navigate major life transitions and trauma recovery. Dr. Vasquez was exactly what Sarah needed: calm, insightful, and completely unimpressed by wealth or social status. At 45, she had the kind of presence that commanded respect while offering genuine warmth. "Sarah, I want you to understand something important," Dr. Vasquez said after hearing the basic situation. "Your value as a person isn't determined by your husband's choices or other people's opinions. The woman who built a successful marketing career, who created a loving home, who is growing a healthy baby despite incredible stress, that woman still exists." "But I feel so stupid," Sarah confessed. "Everyone's saying I should have seen this coming, that I should have fought harder to keep David interested, that I failed as a wife." "When did you stop being Sarah and become just David's wife?" Dr. Vasquez asked gently. The question hit Sarah like a physical blow, because she knew exactly when it had happened. 3 years ago, when David's company went public and suddenly their social circle consisted entirely of business contacts and investors' wives. When she had given up her marketing consulting practice to focus on supporting David's career and preparing for motherhood, when her own ambitions had become secondary to being the perfect executive wife. "I used to have my own business," Sarah whispered. "I used to make decisions and solve problems and create marketing campaigns that change companies' trajectories. When did I become someone who needs permission for everything?" "You didn't lose those abilities, Sarah. They're still there, waiting for you to reclaim them. But first, you need to survive this crisis and protect your daughter's future." Their session was interrupted by the sound of cars in the driveway. Through the window, Sarah watched David return home with Jessica and what appeared to be a moving truck. "They're moving her belongings in," Sarah said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Document it," Maggie advised, already filming from another window. "Every box, every piece of furniture, every sign that she's establishing permanent residence in the marital home." But as Sarah watched Jessica direct movers to bring her furniture into the house where Sarah was still living, where Sarah's unborn daughter's nursery was still being prepared, the enormity of her situation crashed over her. Her water broke for the second time in a week, soaking through her maternity pants as stress-induced contractions began again. "Not again," Sarah gasped, clutching her belly. "Emma, please. Mommy needs more time to protect us." As Maggie called 911 and Dr. Vasquez helped Sarah manage her breathing, Sarah realized that David was nowhere to be found. His phone went straight to voicemail. He was unreachable. Vacationing with Jessica in Turks and Caicos, according to the GPS tracker Maggie had secretly installed on his phone. She was facing motherhood and the battle for her future, completely alone. But this time, Sarah wasn't the same terrified woman who had collapsed on her bathroom floor a week ago. This time, she was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her welfare. And this time, she was ready to fight back. The second ambulance ride in a week felt different from the first. Sarah was no longer the confused, heartbroken woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal just days ago. She was a warrior preparing for battle, and her daughter's impending arrival felt less like a crisis and more like a call to arms. "Maggie," Sarah gasped between contractions, "promise me something. If David shows up at the hospital playing the concerned father, don't let him manipulate the situation. Emma and I need protection, not performance." "I promise," Maggie said firmly, holding Sarah's hand as the ambulance raced through Hartford traffic. "Your daughter is going to be born into a family that actually loves her, not one that sees her as an inconvenience." Dr. Martinez was waiting when they arrived at Hartford Hospital, having been alerted by Sarah's obstetrician about the recurring, stress-induced labor episodes. "Sarah, your body is trying to tell you something important," she said as they settled Sarah into the delivery room. "Sometimes babies arrive early because they know their mothers need them. Emma might be coming now because you need her strength." The labor progressed quickly this time, as if Emma was indeed eager to meet the mother who had been fighting to protect them both. Sarah found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed, channeling months of suppressed anger and determination into bringing her daughter safely into the world. At 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in September, Emma Grace Mitchell entered the world weighing 5 pounds, 2 ounces, small but perfectly healthy, with her mother's green eyes and a determination that was visible from her first breath. "She's beautiful," Maggie whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched Sarah hold her daughter for the first time. "Look at her, Sarah. She's a fighter, just like her mama." Sarah stared into Emma's alert green eyes and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This tiny person was counting on her for everything: protection, stability, love, and the kind of future that David and Jessica's selfishness threatened to destroy. "Hello, my brave girl," Sarah whispered. "I'm your mommy, and I promise you'll never have to wonder if you're loved or wanted. You're the best thing I've ever done." The emotional moment was interrupted 12 hours later when David finally arrived, clearly hungover and reeking of vacation cocktails and another woman's perfume. His entrance into the hospital room was preceded by expensive flowers and his practiced expression of concern. "Sarah, sweetheart, I came as soon as I got the message," he said, though the timestamp on Maggie's voicemail showed he had received the news of Emma's birth 14 hours ago. "How are you feeling? How's our little girl?" Sarah watched him approach the bassinet where Emma slept and felt her protective instincts flare with unexpected ferocity. This man had actively worked to destroy her security and future. He had brought his mistress to live in their home while Sarah was on bed rest. He had been unreachable when his daughter was born because he was vacationing with the woman who wanted Emma to disappear. "Her name is Emma Grace," Sarah said quietly. "She's perfect and healthy. No thanks to the stress you've caused during this pregnancy." David had the grace to look uncomfortable, though Sarah suspected it was more about being caught in his lies than genuine remorse about missing his daughter's birth. "I know I haven't been the husband you deserve during this difficult time," he began, launching into what sounded like a prepared speech. "The business pressures, the merger complications. I lost sight of what truly matters. But seeing Emma, holding my daughter, I realize I need to be a better man." It was a beautiful performance, one that might have moved Sarah a week ago. Now she saw it for what it was: damage control designed to manipulate her emotions during a vulnerable time. "Where's Jessica?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Is she waiting in the parking lot? Or did you leave her at our house to finish moving in her furniture?" David's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Jessica's consulting work has been relocated to Miami permanently. What you saw yesterday was her packing to leave, not moving in. The lie was so smoothly delivered that Sarah almost admired his skill. If she hadn't seen Jessica's social media posts celebrating her new home and upgrade complete, she might have believed him. "I want 50-50 custody," David announced, as if Emma were a business asset to be divided rather than a newborn who needed stability and consistency. "Emma deserves to know both her parents, regardless of what happens between us." The custody battle begins, Sarah realized, watching David hold Emma with all the natural affection of a man posing for a Christmas card. He had never wanted children during their marriage, had actively resented the pregnancy, and had spent Emma's gestation period planning to abandon them both. But now that divorce was inevitable, Emma represented leverage. "Emma needs to bond with her mother first," Maggie interjected, speaking with the authority of someone who had handled hundreds of custody disputes. "At 5 pounds and 34 weeks, she requires specialized care and feeding schedules that don't accommodate shared custody arrangements." "I can hire the best nannies," David countered. "Emma will have every advantage, the best education, the finest opportunities. Sarah can't provide that kind of lifestyle on her own." The financial manipulation was beginning, exactly as Jessica had outlined in her recorded hospital conversation. David was positioning himself as the provider while systematically destroying Sarah's access to marital assets. That afternoon, while Sarah was recovering and bonding with Emma, she discovered that David had indeed cut off all her credit cards and bank access. Her debit card was declined when she tried to pay for coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Her credit cards were frozen when she attempted to buy basic baby supplies. "He's trying to force dependence," Dr. Vasquez observed during her visit that evening. "Classic abuser tactic: create financial crisis to make the victim feel they have no choice but to accept unacceptable terms." But Sarah was no longer the financially naive woman David had married. Watching Emma sleep in her arms, she felt the transformation moment that would define the rest of her life. Looking in the mirror across from her hospital bed, she no longer saw the abandoned pregnant wife. She saw a warrior mother who would move mountains to protect her daughter. "Maggie, I want to call my old boss at Morrison Marketing," Sarah said. "I'm going back to work. Emma and I are going to build our own life, our own security, our own future." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Maggie asked. "It's been 3 years since you worked in marketing, and you'll be a single mother with a premature infant." "I'm more ready than I've ever been for anything," Sarah replied, her voice carrying a certainty that surprised them both. Like Miranda in Sex and the City, "I'm choosing independence over dependence. Emma deserves a mother who creates her own opportunities rather than waiting for handouts from men who see her as disposable." The cultural reference felt appropriate as Sarah made her decision to reclaim her professional identity. She had been Carrie Bradshaw for too long, waiting for Mr. Big to choose her, making excuses for his behavior, believing that love meant accepting less than she deserved. It was time to be Miranda, strong, independent, and unwilling to compromise her worth for anyone's convenience. That evening, Sarah's phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Detective Rodriguez with Hartford Police. We need to speak with you about some irregularities in your husband's business finances. Our white-collar crime unit has been investigating offshore account transfers that may constitute fraud and money laundering." Sarah looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, then at Maggie's encouraging nod, and made her decision. "I'll be happy to cooperate with your investigation, Detective. In fact, I have some information that might be very helpful to your case." The private investigator Maggie had hired had done more than document David's affair. He had discovered that David's offshore account transfers weren't just about hiding assets from divorce proceedings. They were part of a larger scheme involving tax evasion and investor fraud that could result in federal charges. David had a secret son from another affair, and he'd been paying child support for 5 years. Sarah learned from the detective's preliminary questions. The payments had been hidden from Sarah and illegally deducted as business expenses, which constituted both marriage fraud and tax fraud. As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that David's betrayal was even more extensive than she had imagined. But she also realized that she now held the keys to not just winning her divorce, but potentially destroying the financial empire David had built on lies and illegal activities. "Emma," she whispered to her sleeping daughter, "Daddy just made some very expensive mistakes, and Mommy's about to make sure he pays for every one of them." The phone call from Detective Rodriguez had opened a door Sarah never expected to walk through. 2 days after Emma's birth, while she was still recovering in the hospital, a woman appeared in her doorway who would change everything about Sarah's understanding of her husband's capacity for deception. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Maria Gonzalez. I think we need to talk." Maria was beautiful in a completely different way from both Sarah and Jessica. Dark hair, warm brown eyes, and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of supporting herself and her child without help from anyone. She looked to be in her early 30s, professionally dressed despite the obvious stress of the situation. "I know this is awkward timing," Maria continued, glancing at Emma sleeping in Sarah's arms. "But the police investigation has forced some truths into the open that affect both of us." "Please, sit down," Sarah said, gesturing to the visitor's chair. Something about Maria's demeanor, respectful but determined, told Sarah this wasn't a hostile encounter. "What truths are we talking about?" "David Mitchell has been paying me child support for 6 years," Maria said directly. "For our son Tyler, who's now 7 years old. Tyler doesn't know his father's real name, or that he has a half-sister. David told us his name was David Morgan, and that he was divorced with no other children." Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis again, but this time the shock came with a strange sense of relief. She wasn't the only woman David had lied to and manipulated. She wasn't uniquely gullible or naive. David's pattern of deception was simply more extensive than anyone had realized. 6 years, Sarah repeated. "Tyler is 7, which means—" "David was seeing me during the first year of your marriage," Maria confirmed. "I was his secretary at the investment firm where he worked before starting his tech company. I thought we were in love. I thought he was going to leave his wife, you, for me and Tyler. But he never did. No. Instead, he paid me to stay quiet and keep Tyler a secret. $10,000 a month, deposited into an account he set up for Tyler's education fund. I was young and scared and convinced that quiet money was better than a custody battle with a wealthy man who could destroy me legally." Sarah looked at Emma's peaceful face and tried to imagine the terror Maria must have felt as a young, single mother facing off against David's resources and connections. "What changed your mind about staying quiet?" "The police investigation revealed that David's been claiming Tyler's support payments as business deductions on his taxes. He's been committing tax fraud while simultaneously lying to the IRS about having a dependent child." Maria's anger was carefully controlled, but unmistakable. "He used my son and me as a tax write-off while denying Tyler the right to know his father or receive proper acknowledgement." "How did you find out about me and Emma?" "Detective Rodriguez showed me your husband's real financial records as part of the investigation. That's when I learned his real name, his real address, his real wife. That's when I realized Tyler has a baby sister he doesn't know about." Maria's voice softened. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not here to cause you pain. I'm here because I think we both deserve better than the lies David's been telling." Over the next hour, Maria shared a story that was heartbreakingly similar to Sarah's experience. David's promises and declarations of love, his gifts and attention when it served his purposes, his gradual withdrawal when commitment became inconvenient, his skillful manipulation of circumstances to avoid taking responsibility for his choices. "He told me you were cold and uninterested in having children," Maria revealed. "He said your marriage was just a business arrangement and that you wouldn't care about his relationships as long as your lifestyle was maintained. He told me he was working constantly to build security for our future family," Sarah replied. "Every late night, every business trip, every missed dinner was supposedly for Emma's and my benefit." "Chicago," Maria said suddenly. "His business trips to Chicago. Those weren't business trips. He was visiting you and Tyler. Every month, like clockwork. Tyler calls him Uncle David. He thinks his father abandoned us and that Uncle David is just a family friend who helps out financially." Maria's pain was evident. David has been living a complete double life, maintaining relationships with both of us while lying to everyone. Sarah felt a strange kinship forming with this woman who had also been victimized by David's selfishness and deception. What do you want to do about it? I want Tyler to know the truth about his father, good and bad. I want David to face legal consequences for tax fraud and the emotional damage he's caused. And I want to make sure Emma grows up knowing she has a big brother who loves her, even if their father is a narcissistic sociopath. The alliance formation felt natural and powerful. Two mothers who had been pitted against each other by David's lies, now united in protecting their children's interests and seeking justice for years of manipulation. Maria, I have something you should hear, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. She played the recorded conversation from Jessica about wanting Sarah to lose the baby and David's plans to hide assets offshore. Maria's expression grew darker with each revelation. He really was planning to abandon you completely, just like he abandoned Tyler and me, but with even more cruelty. The difference is that now we have evidence, Sarah said, and we have each other. David thinks he can manipulate and discard women because we're isolated and competing for his attention. But what if we stopped competing and started collaborating? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we take David down together, legally, financially, and socially. He's committed tax fraud, marriage fraud, and conspiracy. He's emotionally abused multiple women and children. He's stolen from investors and hidden assets illegally. Sarah's voice was steady and determined. I'm suggesting we make sure Tyler and Emma never have to wonder why their father thought he could treat people like disposable objects. Maria smiled for the first time since entering the hospital room. Mrs. Mitchell, I think we're going to be excellent allies. Call me Sarah, and I think you're right. That afternoon, while Maggie handled legal filings and Sarah recovered from childbirth, Maria provided the missing pieces of David's financial puzzle. She had copies of every support payment, every tax document David had filed claiming Tyler as a dependent, every lie he had told the IRS about his family status. David's been claiming Tyler reduces his tax burden by $40,000 annually, Maggie reported after reviewing Maria's documents. But he's never claimed Tyler on his divorce assets evaluation, which means he's been committing fraud in multiple jurisdictions. What does that mean for our custody case? Sarah asked. It means David's credibility as a suitable parent is about to be completely destroyed. Maggie replied with satisfaction. No judge will award custody to a man who's been lying about the existence of one child while hiding assets from another. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing with a text from Jessica. Heard about the hospital visits and new friends? David and I won't let troublemakers interfere with our plans. Back off now, or you'll regret it. Some secrets are better left buried. Sarah showed the message to Maria and Maggie, realizing that Jessica had somehow learned about Maria's involvement in their case. She's threatening us, Maria said, her protective instincts flaring. What secrets is she talking about? I don't know, but Jessica's desperation is showing, Maggie observed. Threatening witnesses in a federal investigation is a serious crime. She just handed us more evidence. But as they were celebrating Jessica's legal mistake, Sarah's phone rang with news that chilled her to the bone. Sarah. It was Patricia, David's secretary, and she sounded terrified. I think you should know that Jessica asked me for Tyler's school address and Maria's home address. She said it was for legal paperwork, but something felt wrong about it. Sarah looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms, then at Maria's concerned face, and realized that Jessica's threats weren't empty. If you don't drop this, I'll make sure you never see Emma again. Sarah remembered Jessica saying at the hospital. Now Jessica knew about Tyler too, and she was actively seeking ways to hurt both children. The stakes of their battle had just escalated beyond divorce and financial settlements. Jessica was threatening their children, and that was a line Sarah would never allow anyone to cross. Maria, Sarah said quietly, I think we need to take this fight to the next level. Jessica just made this about our kids' safety. What do you want to do? I want to destroy them both before they can hurt Tyler or Emma. Are you with me? All the way, Maria replied without hesitation. Nobody threatens my son. As they began planning their counterattack, Sarah realized that David and Jessica had made a fatal error. They had underestimated what mothers would do to protect their children, and they were about to learn that Sarah Mitchell was no longer the trusting, naive woman they thought they could manipulate and discard. The sisterhood moment between Sarah and Maria felt like the turning point in a war that David and Jessica didn't even realize they were losing. 3 days after Emma's birth, Sarah was discharged from the hospital with a game plan that would have impressed her old marketing clients. The strategy was simple but devastating: use David and Jessica's arrogance against them while building an ironclad legal case for fraud, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The key is making them believe they're winning while we document everything, Maggie explained as they settled into the guest suite of Maria's comfortable Hartford home. Sarah had made the strategic decision to stay with Maria rather than return to the house where Jessica had been posting Instagram photos and moving in furniture. They think you're isolated and vulnerable, Maria added, bouncing Emma gently while Sarah reviewed the legal documents Maggie had prepared. They have no idea we're working together or that Tyler knows the truth about his father now. Tyler Gonzalez Mitchell, Maria had legally hyphenated his name the day before, was a remarkable 7-year-old with David's intelligent eyes and Maria's strong moral compass. When Maria finally told him the truth about Uncle David being his father, Tyler's response had been surprisingly mature. "So Emma's my baby sister?" he had asked, studying the photos Sarah showed him. "And Daddy has been lying to all of us about our family." "Yes, we're sweetheart. Daddy made some very bad choices, but that doesn't change how much Mommy and I love you, or how much your little sister is going to love you when she's old enough to know what a wonderful big brother she has." Tyler had appointed himself Emma's protector immediately, insisting on helping with diaper changes and bottle feedings while Sarah recovered. Watching them together, Sarah felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. Emma would grow up knowing she was cherished by her brother, even if their father saw them both as inconveniences. The legal strategy Maggie had developed was methodical and ruthless. First, they would file motions to freeze all of David's assets pending investigation of fraud and tax evasion. Second, they would present evidence of Jessica's conspiracy and threats against the children. Third, they would use Sarah's marketing expertise to control the narrative and expose David's pattern of deception to his investors and business partners. David's company went public based on financial statements that hid millions in fraudulent deductions, Sarah observed, reviewing the forensic accountant's report. His investors were defrauded about the company's actual profitability and David's character. This goes way beyond divorce proceedings. The SEC is very interested in that aspect, Maggie confirmed. David could face federal securities fraud charges in addition to tax evasion and conspiracy. His entire empire could collapse. Sarah's business comeback was swift and strategic. She had spent the past 3 years building relationships in Connecticut's business community as David's wife. Now she would use those relationships to expose his fraudulent practices and protect other families from his manipulation. "I'm calling an emergency meeting with David's major investors," Sarah announced. "They have a right to know that their CEO has been lying to the IRS, hiding dependents, and committing securities fraud. As a shareholder in the company, I have standing to demand transparency." Maria provided the evidence. Maggie handled the legal framework, and Sarah crafted the messaging that would destroy David's reputation in the business community he valued above everything else. But Jessica's desperation was escalating in dangerous ways. The threats against Tyler's school had been followed by attempts to access Emma's medical records and inquiries about Sarah's location from people claiming to be social services workers. "She's trying to build a case that you're an unfit mother," Dr. Vasquez observed during their therapy session at Maria's house. "The questions about your mental health, the attempts to document Emma's living situation, the claims about Tyler being in an unstable environment, say systematic campaign to gain leverage in custody proceedings." "What kind of leverage?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "If Jessica can convince a court that Emma's better off with David and her as adoptive parents, or that Tyler should be removed from Maria's custody due to environmental instability, she gains control over both children and their inheritance rights. The realization that Jessica was actively trying to take both Sarah's and Maria's children felt like a declaration of war. But Sarah was no longer the woman who collapsed on bathroom floors or waited for rescue. She was a mother with resources, allies, and the kind of strategic thinking that had once built successful marketing campaigns. Jessica made one crucial mistake, Sarah told Maria that evening as they planned their counterattack. She thinks we're still the isolated, dependent women David trained us to be. She has no idea what we're capable of when we work together. The trap Sarah set was elegant in its simplicity. She pretended to accept David's lowball settlement offer, requesting a private meeting to discuss terms. The meeting would be recorded, and Sarah would use her old skills to manipulate David and Jessica into revealing their true plans. "I just want what's best for Emma," Sarah practiced saying, her voice carrying just the right note of defeated resignation. "I can't fight you both, and I can't afford the legal battles. Maybe joint custody would work if we can establish clear boundaries." David agreed to the meeting immediately, probably relieved that Sarah seemed to be capitulating without the expensive legal battle he had feared. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon at a neutral location, the conference room of Sarah's old marketing firm, where she still had allies and access. What David didn't know was that the conference room was equipped with both audio and video recording capabilities, and that Sarah's former colleagues were happy to help document whatever David revealed about his business practices. The night before the meeting, Sarah received an unexpected call that changed everything about her understanding of Jessica's motivations. "Sarah, this is Amanda from the Ritz-Carlton, Miami. I called your husband's office, but they said he was no longer affiliated with the company. I have some personal items that Ms. Raines left in the presidential suite during her last stay, and she's not responding to our calls." "What kind of personal items?" Sarah asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Legal documents, mostly. Some contracts and financial papers that seemed important, and a laptop that she was very insistent about keeping secure during her stay." Sarah realized that Jessica had been careless with evidence that could be crucial to their case. "I'll be happy to pick up those items for her," she said. "Ms. Raines is dealing with some personal issues right now, and I'm helping coordinate her affairs." "That would be wonderful. We've been trying to reach her for weeks." 2 hours later, Sarah and Maggie were reviewing the contents of Jessica's abandoned belongings, and what they found was beyond anything they had imagined. Jessica hadn't just been David's mistress and co-conspirator, she had been blackmailing him. The laptop contained emails detailing Jessica's demands for money, business partnerships, and lifestyle upgrades in exchange for keeping quiet about David's various fraudulent activities. She had evidence of tax evasion, investor fraud, and illegal asset transfers that she had been using to force David into increasingly expensive concessions. "She's been extorting him," Maggie breathed, scrolling through months of increasingly desperate communications from David. "Look at this. She demanded a 50% stake in the company, the house, and a guaranteed divorce settlement of $20 million, or she would expose everything to the ZXE." David didn't leave his wife for his mistress, Sarah realized. His mistress has been forcing him to leave his wife by threatening to destroy his entire financial empire. But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Insurance Policies that contained detailed plans for what Jessica called permanent solutions to temporary problems. "She's been researching ways to make you and Maria disappear," Maggie said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Custody laws for posthumous children, life insurance policies, and what appears to be research into hiring private investigators to handle inconvenient complications." Sarah looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier and felt something cold and dangerous settle in her chest. Jessica wasn't just a homewrecker or a gold digger. She was a sociopath who saw Sarah's and Maria's lives as obstacles to be removed rather than people with rights and feelings. "We're not just fighting for custody or money anymore," Sarah said quietly. "We're fighting for our lives and our children's lives." The empowerment moment came not from anger, but from absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Jessica had declared war on their families, and Sarah was going to end that war decisively. Tomorrow's meeting just became much more important, Sarah told Maggie. David's not just going to confess to fraud and adultery. He's going to hand us evidence that Jessica is a dangerous criminal who belongs in federal prison. Sarah realized she wasn't the victim anymore. She was the architect of Jessica's destruction, and she was very good at her job. The counterstrike was about to begin, and Jessica had no idea what was coming for her. But as Sarah was reviewing the final details of their plan, her phone buzzed with a news alert that made her blood run cold. Breaking Tech CEO David Mitchell hospitalized after apparent heart attack during heated argument. Condition unknown. David was in the hospital, which meant Jessica was alone and desperate, with access to all of David's resources and none of his restraint. Now Sarah must decide whether to save the man who destroyed her, she whispered, looking at Emma's innocent face and knowing that whatever happened next would determine the course of all their lives. The cardiac intensive care unit at Hartford Hospital felt surreal as Sarah walked through doors she had hoped never to see again. Just a week ago, she had given birth to Emma in the same hospital while David was vacationing with Jessica. Now David lay unconscious in room 314, machines monitoring every heartbeat of the man who had systematically destroyed their marriage and threatened their daughter's future. He's stable, but it was a massive coronary event, Dr. E. Patterson explained to Sarah, Maggie, and Maria in the family consultation room. The stress of the past week, combined with what appears to be long-term cocaine use, caused severe damage to his cardiovascular system. He's lucky to be alive. Cocaine use, Sarah repeated, though the revelation somehow wasn't surprising. David's increasingly erratic behavior, his dramatic weight loss, his manic energy during business meetings, it all made sense now. The blood work shows evidence of chronic stimulant abuse. Someone should have gotten him help months ago. Sarah looked through the observation window at David's unconscious form, connected to tubes and monitors, and felt an unexpected wave of grief, not for their marriage, which had been built on lies, but for the man she had thought she knew, the father Emma would never have, the wasted potential of someone who had chosen destruction over responsibility. "I need to see him," Sarah said quietly. "Not for him, but for Emma. Someday she's going to ask me if I did everything I could to save her father's life." The moral lesson moment felt important as Sarah entered David's room alone. Choosing compassion over revenge, forgiveness over bitterness, wasn't about David deserving either. It was about the kind of person Sarah wanted to be and the kind of mother she wanted Emma to see. "David," she said softly, taking his hand despite everything he had done. "I know you can hear me. I know you made choices that hurt everyone who loved you, but Emma needs her father to survive this. Not for our marriage, not for us, but for her." David's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. When he saw Sarah, tears began streaming down his face, the first genuine emotion she had seen from him in months. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything." "Yes, you did," Sarah agreed, not sugarcoating the reality. "But you can still choose to be better. Emma needs you to get well so she can know her father, even if we can't be a family anymore." "Jessica," David croaked, "she's dangerous. I tried to end it, but she has evidence. She threatened Tyler, threatened you. I couldn't get away from her." Sarah's heart clenched as she realized David might have been as trapped by Jessica's blackmail as she had been by his lies. What kind of evidence? Everything. Tax fraud, investor lies, offshore accounts. She recorded our conversations, took pictures of documents. When I tried to leave her, she said she'd destroy me and take Emma away from you. The vulnerability David was showing revealed the broken man beneath his successful facade. Years of building an empire on lies had trapped him in a web of deception that Jessica had used to control every aspect of his life. "David, I need you to tell the truth now. To the police, to the investigators, to everyone. Jessica needs to face consequences for what she's done to our families." "She kept files," David whispered. "Everything's in her laptop, her phone, Her apartment. She documented every crime we committed together because she thought it gave her power over me. As David provided details about Jessica's evidence collection, Sarah realized that Jessica's obsessive documentation had been her fatal flaw. The same records she had planned to use for blackmail would now serve as evidence of her own criminal conspiracy. But their conversation was interrupted by alarms from David's monitors. His heart rate was spiking dangerously, and nurses rushed in to stabilize his condition. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to step out while we handle this crisis," Dr. Patterson said firmly. As Sarah waited in the hallway, Maggie appeared with news that would change everything. "Jessica's been arrested," Maggie announced. "The FBI raided her apartment an hour ago based on the evidence we provided about the blackmail and threats. They found everything David described: files, recordings, documents, and detailed plans to eliminate you and Maria as obstacles to her future happiness." "What charges is she facing?" "Federal extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, tax evasion, and making credible threats against minors. The evidence on her laptop includes research into hiring contract killers and detailed surveillance of Tyler's school schedule." Maggie's expression was grimly satisfied. "She's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison." The karma moment felt both satisfying and hollow. Jessica's downfall was complete, but the damage she had caused to multiple families couldn't be undone by her imprisonment. Over the next several hours, as David stabilized and began providing testimony to federal investigators, the full scope of Jessica's manipulation became clear. She had been blackmailing David for 2 years, forcing him into increasingly desperate criminal activities to fund her lifestyle and secure her future. When David had tried to end their relationship, she had threatened to destroy not only him, but Sarah and Tyler as well. "She wasn't just a homewrecker," Detective Rodriguez explained to Sarah. "She was a career criminal who targeted wealthy married men for systematic financial exploitation. David wasn't her first victim, and you wouldn't have been her last if we hadn't stopped her." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in a Hartford courtroom as the judge announced the settlement that would secure Emma's and Tyler's futures. David's cooperation with federal investigators had resulted in reduced charges for him, but his financial empire was forfeit to restitution and penalties. The court awards Mrs. Sarah Mitchell $8 million in liquid assets, plus the family residence in full custody of Emma Grace Mitchell, Judge Harrison announced. "Mr. Mitchell's visitation rights will be supervised and contingent upon completion of substance abuse treatment and psychological counseling." The female empowerment moment wasn't just about the money, though $8 million would certainly provide security for Emma and Tyler's futures. It was about proving that women who had been systematically deceived and manipulated could fight back successfully when they worked together strategically. 6 months later, Sarah's marketing consultancy was thriving from her home office, specializing in helping small businesses owned by women who had been underestimated by their competitors. Maria had enrolled in law school, inspired by their legal battle to help other families navigate custody and fraud cases. Tyler and Emma were thriving in their unconventional but loving family structure. Dr. James Wright entered their lives as Emma's pediatrician, a kind and stable man who saw Sarah's strength rather than her past trauma. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than financial dependency or desperate need. "You've built something beautiful here," James observed one evening as they watched Tyler teach Emma to clap her hands while Maria studied for her paralegal certification exam. "This isn't what any of you planned, but it's exactly what Emma needs." Sarah looked around her living room, no longer the cold mansion where she had felt isolated and unvalued, but Maria's warm home, where children's laughter mixed with adult conversation and everyone contributed to the family's well-being, and felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. But happiness, Sarah had learned, was fragile and required protection. The apparent happy ending was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find David standing on the porch, tears streaming down his face and panic in his eyes. "Sarah, I need your help," he said urgently. Jessica escaped federal custody during a transport to her sentencing hearing, and according to the FBI, she's coming for you. The sequel hook ending reminded Sarah that some battles were never truly over, and that protecting her family would require eternal vigilance against people who saw love as weakness and children as collateral damage. As she looked at David's terrified face, then back at her daughter sleeping peacefully in Tyler's protective embrace, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of a much longer war. But this time, she would be ready. 6 months had passed since Jessica's arrest, and Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined during those dark days of discovering David's betrayal. The morning sun streamed through the windows of her new home office, where she was reviewing marketing proposals for 3 different women-owned businesses that had sought her expertise after word spread about her successful rebuild. "Mommy, Emma's trying to eat Tyler's homework again," came the laughing complaint from the living room, where Tyler was attempting to complete his second-grade math assignment while entertaining his now-crawling baby sister. Sarah smiled as she saved her work and went to rescue both children from each other. Emma had grown into a determined and joyful baby who seemed to understand that Tyler was her special protector, while Tyler had embraced his role as big brother with the seriousness of someone much older than his 8 years. "Come here, little troublemaker," Sarah said, scooping Emma up and marveling at how much her daughter had grown. At 11 months old, Emma was hitting every developmental milestone and showed no lasting effects from her premature birth or the stress of her early months. The visual cue montage of Sarah's transformation was evident in every aspect of her daily life. Gone was the isolated, dependent woman who had waited for David's attention in a cold mansion. In her place was a confident entrepreneur who had built a thriving business, maintained a loving friendship with Maria, and created a stable home environment for both children. "Dr. James is coming for dinner tonight, right?" Tyler asked, looking up from his math worksheet. "He promised to help me with my science project about heart surgery." "Yes, he'll be here at 6, Sarah confirmed, feeling the familiar warmth that thoughts of James Wright brought to her chest. Their relationship had developed slowly and naturally over the past 4 months, built on genuine compatibility rather than financial need or emotional desperation. James was everything David hadn't been: emotionally present, genuinely interested in the children, supportive of Sarah's career ambitions, and completely transparent about his own life and feelings. He had been Emma's pediatrician since her premature birth, which meant he had seen Sarah at her most vulnerable and admired her strength rather than trying to exploit her weaknesses. "He's not trying to replace your daddy," Sarah had explained to Tyler early in their relationship. "He's just someone who cares about our family and wants to be part of our lives." "I know, Mom," Tyler had replied with the wisdom of a child who had learned to be cautious about adult promises. "But he keeps his promises, and he makes you smile like you used to when I was little." The afternoon brought a video call with Maggie, who was handling the final details of David's sentencing and the distribution of recovered assets to his fraud victims. "Jessica's been assigned to a maximum security federal facility in Pennsylvania," Maggie reported. 25 years without possibility of parole for the conspiracy and extortion charges, plus additional time for the attempted harm to minors. She'll be 70 before she's eligible for release. "What about David?" Sarah asked, though her concern for her ex-husband was now limited to his role in Emma's life. 18 months in minimum security, 3 years probation, and mandatory substance abuse treatment. His cooperation with federal investigators saved him from serious prison time, but his business reputation is destroyed. He'll be lucky to find work as a junior accountant when he gets out. Sarah felt a complex mix of relief and sadness about David's fate. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and built a tech empire was now facing the consequences of years of illegal choices. But his downfall also meant Emma would grow up knowing her father as someone who had been held accountable for his actions, rather than someone who had escaped responsibility for them. The threat returns moment came at 3:47 p.m., when Sarah's phone exploded with news alerts that made her blood run cold. Breaking federal prisoner Jessica Raines escaped during transport to sentencing hearing. Armed and extremely dangerous. If seen, do not approach. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the details. Jessica had attacked two federal marshals during a scheduled court appearance, stealing one of their weapons before disappearing into downtown Hartford during the confusion of a multi-car accident that may have been staged. She's been planning this, Sarah realized, remembering Jessica's obsessive documentation habits and strategic thinking. The woman who had spent 2 years blackmailing David and systematically planning to eliminate Sarah and Maria wouldn't have escaped without a detailed plan for what came next. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life, took my future, stole everything I worked for. Time to return the favor. Sleep tight, knowing I'm coming for everything you love." The threatening messages appeared on Sarah's social media accounts within minutes. Photos of Emma at the park, Tyler walking to school, Maria's law school campus, even James's pediatric office. Jessica had been surveilling all of them, learning their routines, identifying their vulnerabilities. "She's watching Emma's daycare," Sarah whispered, scrolling through additional messages that included photos taken from the parking lot of Little Scholars Academy. "She knows where Tyler goes to school, where Maria works, where James lives." Maria arrived within 20 minutes of Sarah's panicked phone call, bringing Tyler with her and immediately beginning the security protocols they had discussed but hoped never to need. "The FBI is coordinating with local police for protective custody," Maria reported, her paralegal training evident in her efficient handling of the crisis. "But they estimate Jessica has at least a 4-hour head start, and she's demonstrated sophisticated planning capabilities." "What does protective custody mean for the children?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Safe house until she's recaptured. No school, no daycare, no normal routine until the threat is neutralized." Sarah looked at Emma playing happily with her favorite stuffed elephant, blissfully unaware that a dangerous criminal was actively planning to harm her. The juxtaposition of innocence and menace felt unbearable. The final confrontation setup began when Detective Rodriguez arrived with a tactical team and grim news. "Jessica's not acting alone," he announced. "Surveillance footage from her escape shows she was assisted by at least 2 accomplices who were waiting at predetermined locations. This was professionally planned and executed." "Who would help her?" Sarah asked, though part of her suspected the answer. "Other victims of wealthy men who felt betrayed by the system?" Jessica spent her time in custody recruiting women who blamed their legal losses on ex-wives who stole their settlements. "She's convinced at least 3 other women that you represent everything wrong with divorce proceedings." The realization that Jessica had turned Sarah into a symbol rather than just a personal enemy was terrifying. Sarah wasn't just fighting one unstable criminal. She was fighting a group of people who saw her success as proof of systemic injustice. "We can relocate your family until the threat is resolved," Detective Rodriguez offered. "New identities, different state, complete fresh start." Sarah must choose between running away or standing her ground, and the choice felt like it would define not just her own future, but the kind of life Emma and Tyler would have. "No," Sarah said firmly, surprising everyone including herself. "I won't run from Jessica or anyone else. I won't teach my children that the solution to bullies is to hide or give up the life we've built." The character growth was evident as the timid housewife was gone, replaced by a warrior mother who had learned that strength came not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it strategically. "Then we make our stand here," Maria said, standing beside Sarah. "Our families, our community, our life. We don't let criminals decide where we get to live or how we get to raise our children." James arrived during the tactical briefing, immediately offering to relocate his practice if necessary to maintain Emma's medical care during the crisis. His commitment to their safety, even at personal cost to his career, demonstrated the kind of partnership Sarah had never experienced with David. The resolution with open door came 36 hours later, when Jessica and her accomplices were captured attempting to break into Tyler's school during a planned evacuation drill. The FBI's tactical response was swift and decisive, and Jessica was taken into custody without anyone being harmed. She had detailed floor plans of the school, the daycare, and this house, Detective Rodriguez reported after the arrests, plus enough weapons and ammunition to cause significant casualties. Your decision to maintain normal routines while under protection probably saved lives by allowing us to predict her targets. As Sarah watched the news coverage of Jessica's recapture, she realized she felt neither triumph nor relief, just exhaustion and gratitude that her children were safe. "Is it really over this time?" Tyler asked, echoing the question everyone was thinking. "The immediate threat is over," Sarah replied honestly. "But there will always be people in the world who choose anger over healing, revenge over responsibility. Our job is to build lives so strong and so full of love that those people can't destroy what we've created." The therapy wisdom came during Sarah's final session with Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had guided her through the entire journey from betrayed wife to empowered survivor. "You've learned something important, Sarah," Dr. Vasquez observed. "Resilience isn't about avoiding pain or conflict. It's about developing the skills and support systems to handle whatever life brings you." "I used to think strength meant never needing help," Sarah reflected. "Now I know it means knowing when to ask for help and who you can trust to provide it." 6 months later, Sarah opened an envelope that had been delivered to her office by a private courier. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message: "Jessica wasn't working alone. The real mastermind is still out there, and your success has made you a target for people who believe wealthy women don't deserve second chances. Watch your back. You have enemies you don't know about yet. A friend." The sequel hook ending reminded Sarah that some victories were temporary and that protecting her family would always require vigilance. But as she looked at the photo on her desk, Emma taking her first steps while Tyler cheered and James captured the moment on camera, she realized she was no longer afraid of unknown threats. The final shot showed Sarah holding Emma, looking over her shoulder not with fear, but with determination. She had learned to fight for her family's future, and she would do it as many times as necessary. Whatever came next, Sarah Mitchell was ready.